In Chapter 15, we're going to take a look at the blood. This is the last part of the cardiovascular system since we've already looked at the heart and the blood vessels. So what kind of tissue is blood? Remember that blood is connective tissue, and that's because it's going to connect the different parts of the body as it's transported around through the blood vessels. Blood has a lot of different functions. One of its main functions is to transport things around the body, so things like oxygen, carbon dioxide, nutrients, waste products, hormones, and also white blood cells, which are part of the immune system. Another function of the blood is it helps clot the blood, so we don't lose a lot of blood. And it also will help regulate the body temperature. So for example, when you're hot, the blood vessels will vasodilate, bring more blood to the surface of the skin, and then you can dump off more heat, and that'll lower your body temperature. The blood will also help regulate the body's pH and ion balance as well, which we'll take a look at later. The average total blood volume is around 5.5 liters, which if you remember your cardiac output from each ventricle is about 5 liters per minute, which means that you're pumping your entire blood volume about every minute, which is pretty incredible. The blood is composed of two parts. So we have plasma, which is about 55% of the blood, and cells, which make up 45% of the blood. Plasma is the liquid part of the blood, and remember that the plasma is part of the extracellular fluid, and the extracellular fluid is the plasma plus the interstitial fluid. The cells consist of erythrocytes, which are also red blood cells, leukocytes or white blood cells, and platelets. And on this picture that's on the right, this electron microscope view, you can see that most of the cells in the blood are going to be red blood cells or erythrocytes. And then we do have some white blood cells, which is this larger cell on the top right. And then we've also got these smaller cell fragments, which are the platelets, which are used in blood clotting. This picture shows the blood separated into the plasma, and then on the bottom here, the red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets have all settled to the bottom. So this is a purple top tube that the patient's blood has been put into, and it has a chemical in it that prevents the blood from clotting. And that will allow you to see the plasma when it's been centrifuged or the blood has been sitting for a while and the cells have settled to the bottom, and then you can see the liquid part of the blood, that plasma right there. All right, so another thing that we like to measure on patients with their blood would be the hematocrit or packed cell volume. What this is just the percentage of the whole blood volume that is made up of red blood cells. So if we look at this picture on the right, you can see that we've got the plasma here on top, and then on the bottom we've got all of the blood cells. Most of it is going to be red blood cells here on the bottom, and then where this buffy coat is on the top, that's where the white blood cells and the platelets are. So if we look at the whole blood volume, the percentage of this whole blood volume that is made up of just the red blood cells, that is your hematocrit or PCV or packed cell volume. So the normal PCV would be between about 37 to 52%. Okay, and how they measure this is they would take the patient's blood, put it in a little hematocrit tube, and then they put a little bit of clay on the bottom so that the patient's blood doesn't run out the other end, and then they would centrifuge this, and then that will put the cells on the bottom, and then that separates out the plasma here on the top. And then they have a little scale that will measure the entire blood volume, and then you can actually measure the percent out of the whole blood volume that's actually made up out of just the red blood cells. and that'll give you your hematocrit or PCV. And if you have a low PCV, that's below the normal range of 37 to 52%, then you're anemic, which just means that you don't have enough red blood cells. And if your PCV is higher than the 52%, then you have polycythemia. So poly just meaning many, cyte is cell, and emia is just talking about the blood. So you have too many red blood cells in the blood. So a lot of times what causes that would be dehydration. So what happens in dehydration is the amount of plasma is low because you're dehydrated, and that actually increases the relative concentration of the red blood cells. So it ends up making the PCV too high. So that could cause polycythemia. And then there's some other causes for polycythemia as well.